On behalf of Department of Aeronautical Engineering and KCJ College of Technology, I welcome Dr. Arun Balakrishnan as a guest for today webinar. Dr. Arun Balakrishnan is an engine calibration engineer, John Deere Power System, United States of America. Today is going to give a webinar on combustion fundamentals and propulsion system. I think we choose the right person to give a talk about the combustion and the propulsion system. It may be very useful for our students. First, I would like thanks to our management, our director, Madam, our director and CEO, Dr. Anand Jakkaparthi sir, Vice President, AESI India, Chairman, Chennai branch. Also, thanks to Principal and Associate Dean ma'am. I welcome all the students and faculty members and other persons for this evening to attend this webinar. I hope with his experience is going to give a details about the propulsion system. Whatever we are giving the theoretical, we may have that experience in the practically. It will help to our students to understand what is the situation in the aviation industry, and it will more details about the propulsion system. Thank you. I request Dr. Asad to give brief introduction to about our guest, Dr. Arun Balakrishnan.
Thank you, sir. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome all of you to the yet another webinar from Aeronautical Department. So I take pleasure in welcoming our guest for the seminar today. So today we are invited like Dr. Arun Balakrishnan. So I'm happy to tell that he is my student who is who is also I mean, I have been his teacher in my undergraduate days, and he has subsequently gone on to do his master's from BE in Aeronautical Engineering from Tagore Engineering College, and he has subsequently gone on to do his PhD in Aerospace Engineering and Masters in Aerospace Engineering from University of Oklahoma, USA in the year 2017. He's specialized in combustion fuels and engines from the University of Oklahoma, USA. He is currently works on diesel engine performance and emission calibration for variety of John Deere applications such as tractors, wheel loaders, harvesters, and excavators in compliance with final Tier 4 EPA emission regulations. He is also involved in the calibration development of non-road engine applications through test cell work and model-based development. He received his BE in aeronautical from Tagore Engineering College, Anna University, and of course I have already told that. Since joining John Deere Power System, he has been working in the field of calibration development for various diesel engine platforms. So it gives me it's like an apt person, and probably is in the start of his career. So I think the students who do not have much practical knowledge like HOD sir will be able to benefit greatly from him during this webinar. So I welcome you, Arun, and you can probably discuss the webinar and brief us on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And as Dr. Azad sir and Dr. Vijay as I mentioned, I'm a student. I'm their students when they were in Tagore Engineering College. When I did my bachelor's back in 2010, I'm very grateful to have such mentors in my undergrad that enabled me to carry on and pursue my career. So I always owe to my teachers. So as they mentioned, I did my PhD after my undergrad in aeronautical engineering. I worked briefly for a couple of years in India with Boeing. It's called Continental Data Graphics. I did some illustration work over there. And after that, I pursued my PhD in aerospace engineering from 2012 to 17. My specialization is on combustion, primarily combustion and then combustion applications to propulsion system. So in our curriculum, in either aeronautical engineering or aerospace engineering, this combustion would be probably a course or a little chapter in our entire curriculum. But for my PhD work, that's the main topic on which I worked on for about 5 years of academic life, and then now 3 years of professional work. So for the students who are probably in the first year, second year, even third year, probably would have not taken a course on this. So most of our curriculum emphasize more on fluid dynamics, aerodynamics, thermodynamics, then solid mechanics, eventually lead to strength of materials, those type of courses. So propulsion is introduced to our curriculum only towards the end of third year and probably in the final year. So on combustion is a portion of that. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of what combustion means, what are its fundamentals, and its application when it comes to the development of propulsion systems. So in this webinar, I'm going to talk about propulsion systems in general for both aircraft system as well as for other types of propulsion as well as combustion application systems. So here my overall goal or overview of this presentation is to give you an idea of what combustion is and what are its applications in aerospace industry as well as outside aerospace industry, in general propulsion industry. So without delaying much, I will get into the topic. So I'm planning to touch on a variety of topics, and I'm not going to go in details about it, considering the time constraint. But if you have any specific questions, you can stop me in the middle of presentation, or else you can ask me towards the end. And based on what you want to, like, I can brief a little further into the topic. So let me start that. So now we are going to talk about the fundamentals of combustion and its application in propulsion systems. So now, what is combustion? What are the fundamental pillars of combustion? So, like any other courses like fluid mechanics or thermodynamics, combustion by itself is a field of engineering or field of science that has application in almost every industry. So, the combustion fundamentals can be broadly pillared with three pillars. One is thermodynamics, and fluid mechanics, and then chemistry. So basically, combustion is a complex phenomena that has imminent interactions between thermodynamics, fluid mechanics, and chemistry. So chemistry is one part which we don't give much detail in terms of engineering applications, but combustion is this interesting field where you have a combination of all aspect of science that we would have studied earlier, like physics, chemistry, mathematics, and a little bit of even biology. So it's a complex integration of uh, all the science that we would have studied in our school. So in terms of thermodynamics, we deal with energy balance. So when you combust or when the combustion process takes place, how the energy gets balanced between, or how the energy is transformed from one form to another, flame temperature, and then on the fluid mechanics part of it, how the flame propagation, types of flame, how the reactants diffuse, atomize, and how the aerodynamics occurs in any combustion system. And on the chemistry side, stoichiometry, like how stoichiometry is a word probably you would have heard in your chemistry classes. Stoichiometry means to burn a given amount of fuel, how much oxidizer is required for a perfect combustion. And then equilibrium, chemical kinetics, emissions, and pollutants. So I'm going to briefly touch each of these aspects in this webinar. So for my PhD work, I primarily focus. Okay. For my PhD work, I primarily focused on the equilibrium, chemical kinetics, and emissions and pollutants, and also touched fundamental basics of these. So before getting into it, let's define what is combustion. Combustion is can be defined either as a rapid oxidation generating heat. It's basically an oxidation reaction that generates heat, or it could be a slow oxidation accompanied by relatively little heat or no light. So it could be a rapid oxidation or a slow oxidation, but fundamentally it's an oxidation process. Combustion is nothing but an oxidation process that oxidizes the given fuel into the combustion fundamental products with a byproduct of heat and energy, heat and light. So it's basically a energy transformation process where the energy is transformed from the chemical bonds present in the fuel to heat that can be utilized in a variety of ways. So it's basically a transformation of chemical energy to heat energy, and then we use that heat energy for a variety of applications. So I'm not going to go into a lot of details or technical details of it, but even to explain what I'm trying to say, I need to go through some of the basics to make sure that all of us know what we are talking about. So stoichiometry. Stoichiometry means it's the, as I said, it's the amount of oxidizer required to oxidize a given amount of fuel. So this is the stoichiometry for any hydrocarbon air combustion. So hydrocarbon is basically CX, carbon and hydrogen. It could be methane, ethane, propane, butane, diesel, petrol, gasoline, any even biofuels. They are also hydrocarbons. So for burning a given amount of hydrocarbon, we need to have some sort of oxidizer. In this case, air. We can have just oxygen as the oxidizer. So this is basically the basic combustion equation where the fuel reacts with the air to form carbon dioxide, water, and nitrogen, because nitrogen is a non-reactive gas. So so this is the calculation of how much air is required to burn a given amount of fuel. So for a methane air combustion, 1 mole of methane reacts with 2 mole of air to form 1 mole of carbon dioxide, 2 mole of water and nitrogen. So basically, when a combustion occurs completely, the final product would be carbon dioxide and water. If there is incomplete combustion, that's when we form carbon monoxide, unburned hydrocarbons, or soot. Those are criteria pollutants that all of our, owing to climate change, we try to control the emission of those in any combustion systems. So in for the methane air combustion, we so based on this calculation, we need to have 17 gram of air to burn 1 gram of methane. So that's how we define what stoichiometry is. Then there is this term called equivalence ratio. This is a very prevalent parameter used in the field of combustion. So the equivalence ratio is air fuel stoichiometry to air fuel actual. So this is the air fuel stoichiometry of methane air combustion. So for me to burn the for us to burn the methane in air completely, we need to have 17 gram of methane, or sorry, 17 gram of air to burn 1 gram of methane. Instead, so that's the ideal one. Actually, how much air is present in the system defines the equivalence ratio. If the equivalence ratio is 1, it is equivalent to stoichiometric. If equivalence ratio is less than 1, it's a fuel lean system. So basically, in the combustion system, you have more air than what is required to burn the given amount of fuel. If the equivalence ratio is greater than 1, it means you will have a lesser air in the system to burn the fuel completely. So in this combustion condition, it's where we produce a lot of soot on unburned hydrocarbons. So I'm introducing these terms to explain some of the other concepts later in the webinar. So let's get into the aspects of combustion. So there are few key terms that we need to know to understand what the combustion process is. So when we deal with fuel, how to use or how to utilize the fuel, the energy present in the fuel for any combustion applications. So while trying to understand the combustion process, the very important phenomena to know is flammability limit. So we need to have a good idea of fuel to understand its application. So so there are different fuels: diesel, gasoline, methane, hydrogen. So we use a lot of these fuels in different combustion systems. So to be even able to understand and utilize these, we need to understand what flammability limit is. Flammability limit is basically a definition of how much fuel and oxidizer, the ratio of fuel and oxidizer that should be present in the system for the combustion to occur. So based on this graph, you can see that if there is too little fuel, you are not going to sustain a combustion, which we know. If there is no fuel, you are not going to burn. But at the same time, if there is too less air, if say there is too much of fuel and a very little of air, if little of air, then even then we cannot burn, or we cannot burn the fuel, or we cannot sustain a combustion process. So there is a flammability range for any given fuel oxidizer mixture for the combustion to take place. So a knowledge of this is very important when we are dealing with fuel. Two things: if let's say we are burning the fuel in a aircraft engine, right? So in an aircraft engine, pretty much we use jet fuel. In other words, you can call it kerosene. It's a form of kerosene. So we need to understand the flammability limit, because we cannot afford for the flame to blow out in the middle of the air, right? Like, we don't want to lose thrust in the middle of the air. So we need to know the operating limits of this fuel air mixture. The same way, so we need to know a good idea of how much too less fuel we can go. What is the lower limit of fuel in the combustion system that we can go without blowing out the flame? So that information is very important. For this, let's consider storing the fuel, right? So we are storing the fuel in kerosene, like we are storing kerosene, diesel, even in the fuel pump. We store all this fuel. So we need to make sure that there should be a limited amount of, so definitely there will be air filled in any system that we are storing the fuel, but we need to make sure that there is very little air present in the system, and the percentage of that air does not exceed this limit. Because if this limit drops to this level, then we are creating a potential flammable mixture in a storage container. So basically you are making a bomb out of it. So this information on any fuel, like the higher flame, so this is called the lower flammability limit, and this is the higher flammability limit. So we need to have a good understanding of higher flammability limit when it comes to storing the fuel. So we don't want the fuel to burn in the storage container. And the same way, we need to know the lower flammability limit, so that we don't want to blow up the flame in the middle of a combustion process. So this is a very important phenomena that the combustion engineers, or aircraft engineer, aerospace engineer, whatever you call it, we need to know a good understanding of this before we could even go ahead and design a combustion system. So this is an interesting part of this is where I love the combustion course. So this is the slide from my mentor, my PhD mentor. So if at all you have to define the entire combustion process into one equation, how do you represent it? So this is called the Arrhenius equation. Probably we'd have studied in chemistry classes. So basically, this is the equation that represents the reaction rate. So basically, the reaction rate or reaction progress in any chemical system. So how to represent combustion? So here, this X is the rate of reaction, or you can say how much the fuel is consumed, and this is the molar concentration of the fuel. And the A is called as a frequency factor, or call it as a pre-exponential factor. It's basically the collision energy present in any combustion system. Like you would have studied in your thermodynamics class the definition of temperature, right? What is temperature? Temperature is nothing but the degree of randomness, or the degree of or the frequency of particles colliding in an environment. When the temperature increases, that frequency increases, right? So this is that frequency. And the EA is called the activation energy. So how much energy is needed to initiate this chemical reaction? And this T is the temperature of the system. So here you can see that for a chemical reaction, in this case for a combustion reaction to occur, it is dependent on the amount of fuel present in the system. So here you can call it as fuel as well as oxidizer, and then the frequency factor of the system, and the activation enthalpy and the temperature present in the system. So this is the equation on which our entire fire industry is working, like fire extinguishing industry, right? Like fire fighters. So the entire firefighting industry works based on this equation. So let's say um, a place got fire, like a room got fire. So how do we understand the combustion process so that we can put out the fire? Because we don't want the fire to propagate everywhere, right? So the entire fire extinguishing works on this principle. So either we can, so the objective is to make this equation zero. Basically the rate of reaction should be go to zero to put out a fire, right? For this reaction to go zero, it can be possible by making any of these terms to be zero or minimizing these terms, right? So either you can reduce by reducing the molar concentration of the fuel. Let's say if a building got fire, what is the fuel in that, or what is the reactant in that combustion process? It's either the wood or all the combustible material present in the house plus the air present in the medium. So you can put out the fire by reducing two of these components, which is impossible because it's in a firefighting environment that's definitely there. So how else we can reduce? We can reduce by reducing the frequency factor. So the frequency factor is basically halogens. So you could have like if you would have taken any fire safety training or any courses on fire safety, um, there are types of fire extinguishers. Like you could have learned about halogen fire extinguishers, carbon dioxide, water based, sand, right? There are different types of fire extinguisher. So if you think by reducing the frequency factor, if you put out the fire, that's where we use the halogen fire extinguishers. Basically that reduces the collision energy and reduces the probability of reaction progress, and then by reducing temperature. So we all know that if you throw water into a fire, the fire is going to extinguish. How is that actually occurring in terms of chemical kinetics? So basically the water reduces the reaction rate at a much faster phase based on doing these two things. You can see that these two are an exponential factor. So even a slight introduction of water is going to drop down the temperature a whole lot, and also going to drop down the activation energy to progress to keep the combustion occurring. That's the reason water is a very efficient fire extinguisher. So this type of understanding is required whether your objective is to put out your fire or to keep the combustion sustained, right? So we need to have a good understanding of this system to even define and design a system that can either sustain combustion, or if your objective is to put out a fire, that it puts out a fire. So this is a whole new industry probably none of us would have heard about fire extinguishing. So fire extinguishing is a big industry because about 5 to 10% of the landscape present in the earth, they are suffering from fire hazards. Like anyway, all these forest fires that you keep hearing in the news, it's a very big contributor to the climate change. So this is a whole aspect of or a whole different application for combustion. So now let's talk about different types of combustion modes. So first, there are two different types. One is flame combustion. Another one is flameless combustion. Flameless combustion is a little high-end topic. So I'm going not going to talk about it in this webinar. But you can, if you're interested, you can Google flameless combustion. It's a pretty cool and interesting topic. For the flame combustion, there are two different types of flames. One is premixed flame, another one is diffusion flame. So before classifying the flames, let's define what is a flame in terms of technical parameters. A flame is a self-sustaining propagation of a localized combustion zone at subsonic velocities. I underlined those localized and subsonic. Those are the keywords in the definition. So you cannot call any combustion process as a flame. For a combustion to be qualified as a flame, it needs to be a localized combustion zone. So you can define the combustion zone when a flame is occurring, and usually the flame always sustain by traveling at a subsonic velocity. So the flame occupies only a small portion of the mixture. So it starts from one end of the mixture and it propagates. So it is a combustion wave that propagates um, uh, at a localized phase. So if a combustion is discrete at subsonically, we call it as deflagration. So there are different types of flames. If it's a subsonic, it's a deflagration, and if the combustion wave travels at supersonic velocity, those are called detonation. That's when we usually talk about when we read about ramjet and scramjet combustions. But the fundamental mechanism for these two are totally different, which is for topic for another day. Let's talk about the premix flames. So the flames can be classified on several categories. Generally, we classify flames based on premixed and non-premixed, and then laminar and diffusion. So the premixed and non-premixed are classified based on how the reactants mix. If the reactants, let's say if the fuel and oxidizer mix before the combustion could occur, it's called premixed. If the reactant, the fuel and oxidizer mix at the interface of combustion or at the combustion wave or flame, it's called non-premixed or diffusion. There the fuel and oxidizer primarily mix uh, based on only molecular diffusion. And then based on laminar and turbulent, if the flame characteristics does not change with respect to time, it's a laminar flame. If it changes with respect to time, it's called a turbulent flame. So this is a Bunsen burner flame. Here you can see that the fuel and the oxidizer mixes before the combustion occur, like before the combustion. So basically the fuel and air is already mixed in this part of the burner, and then when it comes out it burns. So you can see that this blue region is the premix flame, and this is a laminar flame because the flame characteristics do not change with respect to time. Like if you take several pictures, it's going to be within the same frequency of the combustion. So based on the color of these flames, you can identify the temperature. So basically there are infrared detectors where based on the color of the flame it can detect the temperature. So this is a different laminar premix flame. You can see that the white color is the highest temperature. This is a flat flame burner. And then, okay, we talked about a laminar flame now, but what's the real application? What's the application of these flames, right? So the primary or the classical example of a premixed flame is our petrol engine, otherwise called as gasoline engine. So here you can see that the fuel and air, we call it as charge, is injected into the cylinder in a gasoline engine, and it is compressed during the compression stroke, and it is ignited using a spark plug. So in this, the combustion mode is a premixed combustion mode. So it's a classical example of what premixed flame is. And then let's talk about diffusion flame. A classical example for a diffusion flame is a candle flame. Here you can see that the fuel is the wax, which is when it is heated up, it melts and it transfers from solid phase to liquid phase and then vapor phase before it gets entrained in the flame, and the air, which is the oxidizer, is entrained through the flame. So at the flame front, fuel and air is mixed. So this is the diffusion flame. Here you can see only the fuel is coming out of the burner and the air is coming through the entrainment. Here the orange flame is the region of soot luminosity and the blue is the chemiluminescence. So based on the colors, you can identify how these flame regions are. So this is an example of a turbulent flame. So primarily diffusion flames tends to be turbulent. The reason is when the air is entrained into the flame, it introduces vorticity into the flame, which eventually makes the flame turbulent. So an application of diffusion flame. So here is another fun factor. So in the earth, inside the earth, whenever you have a candle flame, the candle flame looks like this, irrespective of whether you have the flame up front or even if you have the flame horizontal or the candle horizontal, or even if you bring the candle downwards, the flame is always tend to go upwards. The reason for that is the gravity present in the earth and the basically the two competing forces, the gravitational force because of the earth magnetic poles, and then the buoyancy force, which is compensating the the gravitational force. So the buoyancy force is what keeps the flame like this. The gravitation, the competing gravitational and buoyancy force. Whereas this is what we call it as a microgravity combustion. When in the absence of or in the absence of gravitational force or in a minimal gravitational force, a flame tends to look like this because of the absence of buoyancy. Okay. So now, what's a fundamental or a classical example of diffusion flame? It's a diesel engine combustion. In a diesel engine combustion, we don't premix air and fuel. The diesel alone is being injected into the cylinder and it's been compressed, and then because of its auto ignition temperature, the diesel burn by itself. And this is a schematic of how a diesel engine flame looks like. I'm not going to go into details of these, but this is how a diesel flame looks like. Now, if we come back and look at the burner, can see that. So we mentioned that this is the pre-mixed flame, right? You can see that there is another region on the outer periphery of the flame. It's nothing but a diffusion flame. So this is what we call it as partially pre-mixed flame. So in any practical application, what we come across is a partially premixed flame. What I mean by that is fuel and air oxidizer is already mixed here, but not all of the fuel is burnt within the premixed zone. So then there are some unburnt fuel that crosses this zone, and then it meets the air from the environment from the ambient to burn. So a premixed, the outer periphery of the premixed flame becomes a diffusion flame. So this is the most practical combustion system, how it works. So now, before we can proceed there, now let's try to answer some of the questions. So why is that all these flames look like a cone, right? So what determines the shape of the flame? So the primary factor that determines the shape of the flame is the velocity profile and the heat loss to the tube wall. So let's say even in our fluid mechanics class, we would have studied this, right? So the velocity distribution on a circular jet is always a normal Bill distribution curve. So usually the distribution goes like this. So it's the same thing. If in a non-reacting mixture you get a normal distribution curve, the same with the reacting mixture. When I say reacting mixture, it's the mixture reacts within itself. So because of that, you tend to get the profile. And how does this flame remain stationary on a burner? Like even in any burner, the flame has to remain stationary, right? Because let's again come back to the example of aircraft engine. We don't want the flame to go to extend or to shorter, because the combustion system is designed in such a way that we want to contain the entire flame within the combustion chamber. If suppose the flame get extended, if the length of the flame get extended, what happens? The flame extend into the nozzle, which we don't want, because two things. One is we are going to damage the nozzle, because the nozzle is not designed for high temperature. And then we are going to lose thrust, because we are not expanding all of the exhaust energy from the combustion, right? The same way, we don't want the flame to get shorter, because if the flame gets shorter, there are two things happen. Potentially we would blow off the flame, or the combustion occurs much early in the combustion chamber, so we will lose a lot of heat before we could expand the jet to produce the thrust. So we want the flame to be as stationary as possible. So for the flame to be as stationary as possible, we must need to equalize the jet speed that's coming out of the burner. Basically, the unburned gas coming out of the burner should equalize the flame velocity. If that doesn't occur, there are two phenomena which is not which are not favorable in any combustion system. One is called a blow off, another one is called a flashback. So when that's the next slide. Flame blow off versus flashback. Let me play this here. Okay. So the blow off is basically when the unburnt gas, or the unburnt gas mixture, or the reactant mixture coming out of the burner, if that velocity is higher than the flame propagation, it tends to push the flame out of the burner. So that's the phenomena when the combustion is not stable, your flame gets blown off and you start puking fuel into the combustion chamber, which is a safety hazard as well as a operational hazard. The same way flashback. Flashback is when the flame velocity is higher than the gas velocity, or higher than the reactant mixture, the flame tends to go inside the combustion chamber. Now I'm going to play this video where you can see. So now it's a slow motion video. Okay, I'm going to pass it here. So there you could have seen that the flame blowed off, which we don't want. The same way we don't want the flashback to occur because it's again a safety hazard, because we don't want the flame to go back all the way to the fuel chamber and create a potential explosion hazard. Right. So in any combustion system, irrespective of a rocket engine or an aircraft engine or a car engine or a bike engine or even a thermal plant, like any all of these industries, they produce heat and steam based on this combustion. So we don't want in any of these combustion system for the flame to go back. So this is what we call it as flashback. There are ways to mitigate this. So usually what we put there is a flashback flame arrestor. It's basically a grid or a mesh that we put down upstream of the burner, so that when the flame travels till that flame arrestor, the flame arrestor will quench the flame, meaning it reduces the temperature of the flame, so that as we already mentioned, if the temperature is dropped, the flame is not going to sustain, so it's going to kill the flame. So but potentially we don't want any of these to happen. So that's where the combustion knowledge and combustion engineering skills come into picture to design a robust combustion system. So now let's go back to the next slide. Now with the basic fundamental knowledge of combustion, let's get into the application of combustion propulsion systems. So in this propulsion systems, I'm going to talk about a wide variety of propulsion systems. First one is the all the car engine, the spark ignition engine, otherwise called as gasoline engines. I'm not going to go into the details of how this works, but how the combustion occurs. So basically here, during the intake stroke, the air molecule as well as the air fuel mixture, because of the way the air fuel is a pre-mixed flame, the air fuel mixture gets injected in, or sucked into the cylinder, being compressed, burned during the combustion stroke, and then during the power stroke it's exhausted, and then the gas is vented out. So the spark ignition is a pretty classical example of internal combustion. So we divide the propulsion systems in a wide different categories. One of them is internal versus external. So internal combustion occurs within a enclosed space, like in diesel engine, where the air is being pulled or sucked into the cylinder and being compressed here, and then because of auto ignition temperature, the fuel gets burnt, and then the power stroke occurs. The fundamental difference between spark ignition and compression ignition is how the fuel is ignited in the system. In a spark ignition engine, the fuel will not be ignited by itself. A spark plug, an external energy is required to initiate the combustion reaction. A spark is required. If there is no spark plug, a gasoline is not going to combust. Whereas in a diesel engine, there is no injector. There is no spark plug. The fuel air mixture here burns because of auto ignition temperature, because of the heat produced by the compression. It auto ignite. That's the reason we call this as a flame, because the flame always occurs near the spark plug and it propagates towards the piston. Whereas in a diesel engine, the flame can occur anywhere in the system. It doesn't have to propagate from the fuel injector. It could occur anywhere within the system, and it can expand through the entire combustion chamber. So that's the reason we call diesel as a compression ignition. We achieve ignition through compression process, and this is also called as a controlled detonation, because you're basically creating an explosion, but it is in a controlled manner. That's the reason always diesel engines require much more robust infrastructure for the engine to operate than a gasoline engine. That's the reason gasoline engines are lighter than diesel engine, but the diesel engines have higher compression ratio, leads to higher combustion efficiency. That's the reason we always get higher mileage for diesel than gasoline. So that's a pretty wide and depth topic to talk about just the gasoline engine and diesel engine, but this is just to show application of internal combustion. Now let's talk about the external combustion. External combustion means your combustion still is in an enclosed space, but it is not defined by a fixed control volume. So here, um, the flow of air is a continuous external. So the air is sucked into the engine, and then it burnt in the combustion chamber and expanded in the nozzle. So there are different types of propulsion system, as probably you would have know. I just put the basic one, the turbojet, turboprop, and turbofan. Here, the fundamental difference between these three engines is the way how you draw in air from ambient, or how you achieve the compression process required for combustion. Here we achieve compression through a turbine running a turbojet. Here we achieve the same compression through a turboprop, here using a turbofan. But once it crossed this area, once it get into the combustion chamber, the fundamental combustion phenomena is the same. So basically air is sucked here and then burn in the combustion chamber, then it get expanded through turbine and nozzle. Let's go a little deep into how the combustion occurs. So this I think I have taken from a textbook called gas turbine combustion. So here the air is being sucked into the engine, the fuel is injected, so and then the air spiller is there. So the combustion chamber can be divided into three areas. One is primary zone, intermediate zone, and dilution zone. Primary zone is where the flame is stabilized and the flame is localized and the flame is anchored. We use these terms: stabilized, localized, and anchored. Means stabilized means it's not going to move around, it's not going to change its combustion frequency. That's called stabilized. Localized means it's going to stay there, it's not going to move around. Anchored, stabilized and anchored are pretty much same. Anchored means it's fixed there, the flame is going to sit there and burn. So how that is possible? It's because of the swirler present here that creates a uh, uh, turbulent flow. We call it as uh, a turbulent region to anchor the flow. It's basically a backflow that creates a low pressure region here to anchor the flow. So the presence of that air swirling, the presence of this localized uh, uh, backflow region, we were able to anchor the zone here, sorry, anchor the flame here, and then bypass the air, and then it starts entraining into the flame in the intermediate zone. So this is for two reasons. One is to anchor the flame here, the other reason is to protect the engine lining from overheat. So it serves two purposes. One is to anchor the flame, the other one is to protect the engine, and the third one is dilution zone, where it brings down the temperature and uh, expand through the nozzle as well as turbine to create thrust. So this is the basic combustion process occur there. I think I'm running out of time, so I'll try to jump a little bit. So then I want to talk about this emission and pollutant. So in the last 10 to 15 years, the whole combustion industry has changed. So like the combustion has a pretty good literature, pretty good history with humankind, right from the caveman. So and also we have well established combustion industry that do a lot of research on combustion for the past 200 to 300 years. But in the last 15 to 20 years is when we talk too much on emissions and pollutants. Previously we always talk about efficiency, how to burn fuel more efficiently, how to extract energy more efficiently. That was the primary scope back in 1950s to 1980s. But starting from 1990s now, we put more emphasis on emissions and pollutants because of its effect on the climatic change and all the consequence on our weather and climate. So the major pollutants that we worry about is unburnt or partially burnt hydrocarbon because of incomplete combustion, and then carbon monoxide, sulfur oxides. This nitrogen oxides joined the club pretty recently, like back in 1990s, because all these days we were thinking that nitrogen is a inert gas or noble gas. It's not going to react. That's what we learned in chemistry. But this nitrogen tends to react with oxygen at elevated higher temperature to form nitric oxide and nitrogen dioxide. Together we call it as NOx. So this NOx is a criteria pollutant even at the ppm level. Ppm means parts per million. Even at a, let's say if there are million air molecule, even if even with a 4 or 5 molecule of nitrogen oxide in a million molecule of air, this is going to harm the atmosphere. So people have done a lot of research on how it affects vegetation and how it affects our human health. Like pretty much it causes lung cancer and all the related breathing related issues. So even my PhD work was heavily emphasized on understanding how this nitrogen oxide is formed. So I try to understand the relationship between fuel chemistry and how these nitrogen oxides are produced. Excuse me.
പക്ഷേ പക്ഷേ ഇത് കൂടെ അഡീഷണൽ കോഡ് വരും കേട്ടോ. No, no,
No, no,
you
it's
carry
okay.
on, you carry on. അഡീഷണൽ കോഡ് വരും.
Arun,
you carry on.
Oh, okay, okay. Sorry, I thought someone is asking a question. So, so particularly for the aircraft industry, why we need to be worried about these emissions and pollutants? Because we are we are combusting the fuel at a feet of 25,000 to 50,000 feet, and with a lesser dense air over there, releasing these toxic substance can very well impact the ozone depletion that we always talk about, right? So this NOx play a pretty big role in the intoxicating the ozone and create all these climate related stuff. So recently what happened around the world, every country try to put regulation on how much emission that you can how much pollutants that you can emit for a given power that you are producing. So they start putting all these regulations starting from California, USA. Europe is taking a pretty big lead on it now. Probably in the news you would have read about Bharat stage, BS4, BS5, BS6. For India we call it as Bharat stage. So now we are trying to push Bharat stage 6. So what are these? So we have the same thing. For China we call it as NR4, NR5. For US we call it as FT4, IT4. For Europe you call it as EU 4, 5, different levels. So basically with all those emission regulation, the every country is trying to limit the pollutant emissions from these combustion systems, so that to make the combustion more efficient in terms of energy as well as not polluting the environment. So because of all these regulations, um, we tend to rely on much more understanding of how to better combust the fuel so that we extract this energy without doing much harm to the environment. So that's where we as a combustion engineer coming to picture on try to understand the relationship between fuel, oxidizer, combustion environment, and the whole ecosystem of how this combustion occurs. Since we are running out of time, I'm going to show a couple of slides on my PhD work. Uh, with my PhD work, I can talk hours and hours of presentation, but because of the time constraint, let me just try to explain the title of what I did. So this is from the Biofuel Combustion Research Lab at the University of Oklahoma, USA. It's present in the state called Oklahoma. And this is my dissertation title, where I try to understand the effect of fuel unsaturation on pollutant emissions. This pollutant emissions include soot, carbon monoxide, and nitrogen oxides from the laminar flames of pre-vaporized petroleum and biodiesel blends. So I worked on biodiesel fuels, how to harness the energy of biodiesel in terms of all these propulsion systems. So on the whole, I try to understand the relationship between the fuel that we are using to the combustion environment. I'm going to skip through some of these slides to just give you an overview of what I did. So basically, all my research work is on flames. So why we did flames? It's because we try to understand the combustion process or the combustion chemical reaction. So pretty much I emphasized on the chemical kinetics occurring in the different fuel at different equivalence ratio. So for different ratio of air present in the combustion system, how the combustion can vary. So I did the same research on diesel fuel versus PME means palm methyl ester. It's a biodiesel based off palm oil, and CME stands for canola oil, canola methyl ester. It's basically a trans esterified oil. So these are the chemical reaction that I studied in a combustion process to understand how actually nitrogen reacts with oxygen and a different condition. So these are different types of mechanism people have studied before to that occur in particular combustion condition. So this is my contribution to the combustion, where I try to develop this establish this parameter where we basically rank the fuel with a number. That number is basically defined based on the number of carbon, nitrogen, halogen, and hydrogen present in the fuel. So for any fuel we try to link it to a number. So it's basically the number of double bonds present in the fuel. So here you can see there is no double bond, so it's 0. Here there are two double bonds, 2, and here there are 1, 2, 3, and one ring, 4. So it's a pretty different topic. I'm not intended to discuss all of these, but just to show how much potential that we have in doing research on combustion. So by establishing this parameter, what I did is uh, I developed this experimental correlation equation. So this is one of the equation from my PhD work, where this DOU is the one that I showed. It's basically related to the fuel that has been used. Phi is the nature of the combustion system. So basically, whether if it's a fuel rich environment or fuel lean environment, depending on how the fuel environment changes. This EANO is the emission index of nitric oxide. So by understanding how much what fuel you are using, and how much fuel, or how what is the ratio of the fuel that you're using, we can estimate how much NOx that you're going to produce in a particular combustion environment. This is particularly useful. This sort of relationship is particularly useful because we can predict how much NOx that we can produce for any design phase. Like if you are designing a combustion system for a biodiesel or any fuel, then based on the operating condition of the combustor and the fuel, we can predict how much NOx that we are going to emit. So all these world countries, they put a regulation. Okay, for producing a given amount of power, you can make only X amount of NOx. So since this is enforced by the regulation agency, we can backtrack. So since we know this number, we can backtrack this and this to be in compliant with all those regulations. So this is particularly useful when you try to develop a new combustion system, or when you try to use a new fuel, and we call this term called engineering the fuel. So now we came pretty good on manipulating the fuel chemistry, where you can basically alter the fuel to comply for a given emission requirement. So this is the outcome of my research. We published this in about 7 different journals, and I'm still working on 3 more papers to publish the rest of my work. But this is a correlation that can be used as a convenient tool for fuel development. So for engineering the fuel, particularly biodiesel, this will be a good starting point to understand the fuel chemistry and its relationship to the environment. Okay, now we are at the concluding phase. Just to show how much combustion research is required, or how much combustion is driving the entire world and its economy. So here you can see, so this is based on American industry, but it holds good for the entire world. Here you can see out of the energy consumed or combustion produced, combustion is the contributor. So in any of these petroleum or products or steel, chemical, glass, metal casting, any food processing industry, more than 80% of the energy need for these industries comes from combustion. For the aerospace industry, practically 100% of its energy comes from combustion. So combustion is a pretty open, pretty wide and depth field that still requires a lot of research to better utilize what we have as a combustion process. So now this comes to the conclusion of this webinar, where I want to emphasize on, as a aerospace engineer, so this is one specific advantage that we have as an aerospace or aeronautical or even mechanical engineer, is that we understand the basic components of how a system work, right? For any system to work, there are basic inputs and outputs for the system. For a propulsion system to design a aircraft engine, or to design a power plant, or even to design a combustion equipment, even to design a furnace, to design a gas stove burner, for any combustion system to design, we need to have basic understanding of thermodynamics, basic understanding of fluid mechanics, and basic understanding of solid mechanics, because we need to design material to make any of this combustion system to work. So with the invention, with the discovery of titanium alloy is what made us to produce such a huge amount of thrust in aircraft engine. So st- uh, basic or superior understanding of solid mechanics, fluid mechanics, thermodynamics, strength of materials, and chemical kinetics require to understand and develop a combustion system. So combustion engineers are in great demand across the world. Forget about the title. Combustion engineers are called as application engineer, utility engineer, aerospace engineer, aeronautical engineer, controls engineer. But end of the day, what you're required to know to be a successful combustion engineer is a basic understanding of what we study as a curriculum in our undergrad. Like basically right from your second year of college, where you're introduced to solid mechanics, fluid mechanics. Those are the fundamental basics for any of these industries. Like I'm not an expert in aerodynamics industry. I'm not an expert in a material science industry. But since this combustion industry encompasses the advantages of all of these, a superior understanding of all those subjects is highly required to be a successful engineer as such. In terms of two opportunities, one is employment opportunity, another one is research opportunity. So research opportunity wise, you have a pretty wide scope, either be it a flame research or so my research, basically my PhD research, it can be applied in several industry. It can be applied to engine, it can be applied to burners, furnaces, process industry. So I was basically funded by a burner company located in Oklahoma, where they directly applied the outcome of my research. So so right now I work for John Deere, where we develop engines. So part of my understanding of my combustion, how the NOx related to the pollutant emissions, that particular portion of my knowledge helps in developing calibrations for complying with the emission regulations. So there are pretty good scope within India, outside India. Within India, there are a lot of automotive manufacturer like Ashok Leyland, John Deere, Caterpillar, uh, like a lot of these motor companies. When it comes to aerospace, you have General Electric, like Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, or a lot of these companies. When you come outside India, you have Boeing, Airbus, Rolls Royce, Pratt and Whitney. Even though the immigration visa, those are a different complex scenario, but still the aerospace industry in India is expanding up. So as long as you are well equipped, well knowledged, and well understood about what you are studying, there is a plenty of opportunities in terms of combustion research, both on academic side as well as the industry side. If you have any specific questions, let me know. You can reach me out through Azad sir or Vijay Raja sir. I'm more than happy to guide you in terms of choosing a course, or if you want to go for higher studies. If you want to come to US for higher studies, I can guide you, but I'm not sure about how it works in Europe or Australia or Canada. But I can overall guide you on how to get into combustion research, basically combustion and propulsion. That's it from me. Let me know if you have any questions. I think I gone over a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was very nice. Thank you very much, Dr. Arun. I think it was very enterprising and complete from the fundamentals till the your PhD research. You have given a full clear picture. So I've already requested, if anybody is having any questions, please post in chat window, or you can unmute and ask as well. If you feel shy, you can at least type in the chat window. We'll try answering it. So anybody is having any questions, please type. Okay, Arun, you can just briefly tell like what are the steps that I mean, not I'm not talking about a conversion. Just what are the steps that are required for the like if somebody wants to apply for a master's in US or
Yep.
or
So first
PhD?
step is you need to have a TOEFL or IELTS. So these are basically a test that can prove that you know English at a level where you can learn, speak, write, and read. So that's a basic exam. So TOEFL and GRE. GRE is basically an aptitude test to understand that you have the aptitude ability to learn a course. So this TOEFL and GRE is recommended. It's required. Sorry. So TOEFL can be swapped with IELTS, but I did TOEFL. And it's been more than 8 years now, so there are things that have changed. But as far as I know, still these two are requirement. So set that aside. In terms of research area, there are two ways that you can do. One is apply for a master's or even directly apply for a PhD. So basically, even though I got an admit for masters, after I talked with my professor, I converted it into a PhD program. So I didn't have a master degree. After bachelor's, I directly started my PhD work. So one thing about US universities is professor has much more power than back in India. So in India, the entire admission system decides on what are the courses that you need to take for the research. But in the US, the professor has a lot to say. So based on your undergrad research, that's when your undergrad final project is very important. So if you have if you have an idea of going to higher studies, I strongly recommend to do your final project. Even the third year, the couple of projects that you do in your third year and final year, those are very important in terms of securing admission anywhere, not only in US, in any country. My suggestion is, if you have this plan of going for higher studies, sort out the university. So go research. Pretty much you have all the information online. So go and search for the countries that you want to go. And once you sort out the countries, then go for the number of universities. My suggestion is always first decide which area you want to go rather than going behind the university names. My suggestion is first, okay, so when I try to apply for US, I decided I'm going to do my research in propulsion. So I'm not going to go to aerodynamics, I'm not going to go to structures. So I was clear that I'm going to go for propulsion. Then when I started sorting out the universities, I have like a 10 to 12 universities sorted out. I know based on my academic standing which university I could get into and which university I'm not. So I ranked them into dream universities, you can university, and safe university. Basically this is the entire admission process. With the dream universities, it's good if you get, but it's not guaranteed. In safe universities, it's basically like, no, worst case, I will get through these universities. Then you have your own set of universities where you have a good chance of getting into. So once you rank them, then you start getting into the professors. So whoever doing research, my suggestion is this whole process will take close to an year to go through this TOEFL, GRE admission process. So my strong recommendation is through that 1 year, be in contact with these professors in these universities, because that's going to give you a whole new perspective of what you're up to, like what you're going to do and all those things. And make a note that not all professors will respond. So professors has lot of work to do, and responding to your email is the least priority for them. But don't lose hope, try to reach out to them, definitely someone will respond. So that's the process. Go through their research. Go through what are the research that they are doing. Most of them you may not understand. At this point, you may not understand most of the work that they do. But it's okay not to know things, because we are at a point we don't know anything, right? So when I started this combustion process, sorry, the combustion research, I have zero knowledge of what combustion is, except for some brief introduction in our propulsion course. It's okay not to know things. So you can reach out to professor and say that I don't, rather than asking what should I study. So this is one question that I always get from the students. Is it good to study MS in aerospace? Is it good to study? Is it good to study? There is nothing called bad to study. Okay, any study is good. It's dependent on which one you like, which one you want to do. So before reaching out to anyone, do some basic research on what is there. If you don't get any information, then reach out to people. That's the reason most people get annoyed helping to students, because they don't do any fun research, basic research on what it is before coming to them. So if you come to me asking questions, there are few things I expect from you, that whether did you go online and read about it, whether did you do some basic research on what combustion is. If you do that, I agree you don't get 100% information online, but at least 60 to 70% information you can get it online. The remaining 30% you can reach out to people who are in the field to get more idea. So I think I covered it. I'm not sure
Yes,
if there is
I think
anything
you
else.
covered it. Yeah, so I think yeah, the others also, if you want to reach Dr. Arun in any other way, you can either get it through me or Dr. Vijayaraja sir. And it's always a pleasure to listen to your student, and he lectures you. It's an like a reverse scenario. So it's always a pleasure. It's always a bright feeling for any teacher. So since it's already late evening here now, and many of you had a long day today already. We have the online classes from 10 to 5, so
Oh,
almost
okay.
drains them their data as well as their I think energy also, and maybe even the eyes also. Now since they'll be staring at the screen. So anyway, thanks for joining all the faculty and the staff and the students who have joined. And in fact, even we'll have the recording. So anybody wants to listen to it later, also you can later listen to it. So thank you, and hope you had a fruitful session. And tomorrow we'll meet you again in another webinar. Vijay sir, if you have anything to add, you can add.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Arun. It was very interesting and nice presentation. The basic idea of a propulsion, as well as what you did in your PhD work, it was very interesting. And moreover, it may be very useful for our students also. I hope they may contact through us to you. And I request Mr. Venkatraman to give the more vote of thanks. I think you know he is your senior.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, I was just thinking, is that my senior Venkatraman? I was thinking, but yeah,
Thank you, Arun. Thank you, Dr. Arun, for joining with us. In fact, Arun, I have attended your webinar in SRM,
oh
I think
yeah.
a week before. I have asked you a
Frankly
question,
speaking,
and
frankly speaking, this is the same content.
yes, but I have loved to hear it again because I have got so many understanding. As you know, Arun, we don't have combustion as a compulsory paper for
Yeah,
a graduate student, and still
yeah,
I think it is in elective.
yep,
But in masters also, it's still in elective. So I think
yes.
it's
So
it's a wide area. From your presentation, I understand that there are so much things to learn as undergraduate and graduate student.
yeah.
So
So
again,
actually,
as uh,
yeah,
yes, sir.
sorry. Sorry to interrupt. So this is something I wanted to share. So when I started my grad school year, I basically struggled because most of what I learned here was not part of my undergrad curriculum. So this is something I know. Developing an infrastructure for combustion research is it's not easy. It's very expensive, but I hope to see some combustion facility starting up probably in KCG also. If you have any plan of doing that, I would love to contribute.
Yes.
Just not even part of John Deere. On a personal level, I would love to have this at least optional research work for people who are interested. So
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Arun.
you, Arun, for that. Again, I was looking for asking these content to you. I'm glad that you have come out from your side. We have a laboratory in NCRT in IIT Madras recently set, and it's a national facility for combustion. I
yep,
think Jerajas as a friend is working there. We have got a very good facility, and in KCG also we are looking for some projects related to combustion. I think we'll get in touch with you.
sure.
Surely we'll make at least not a big level, start a facility where we can do some fundamental research.
Yep.
Thank you, Arun. Again, on behalf of the Department of Aeronautical Engineering and Aerospace Engineering, KCG College of Technology, I thank you for giving wonderful content today. And I'm sure as a faculty and a student, they have so much things to take away for the day. Again, I thank you, Arun. I will get in touch with you. We have some ideas on doing a proposal with NCDRD. I
Sure.
think we'll work it out. Thank you, Arun, for
Thank you.
giving this full day.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Thank you for this
Thank you.
opportunity.